Hello, friends. Okay, I see there's some people joining. Howdy, howdy, howdy. How's everyone doing? Oh, okay. Welcome to the Duck Show. Everyone's favorite bi-weekly Monday seminar. Okay, that was fun. All right, hello. Hello to you who are watching and those who are going to watch later. Either way, we're here. We're having some fun tonight. Doing another duck seminar like we do every couple of weeks. And this one should be fun. So let me crack open a Heineken Zero. That means it has 0 alcohols in it. This episode is sponsored by Heineken Zero. Not really. I have no sponsors. Yet. Maybe one day. Oh, that's good. That's good. All right. Today's episode or seminar or masterclass is called Fun Former Financial Figures. I like alliteration, okay? Sorry. Is that okay with you? A little alliteration never hurt anyone, if you ask me. Why are we talking about this? Because learning from history is important. So you can, learn from their mistakes or their successes or something, and also just get inspirations. So I want to show you my special binder. This is my special binder. Right here. This binder, this white binder, I keep in the bedside stand next to my bed. To the side of my bed. The nightstand next. I think that's appropriate terminologies. And in this book are stories. It's kind of like a nursery rhyme, but for credit card churners. Not really. Of course, this is history, so back then they didn't really have credit card churners or slot machines or cryptocurrencies. But, these people that I'm going to discuss with you tonight, they would have enjoyed those things. I once heard a quote from Bobby Fischer. It's a great quote that he said. He once said, I'm not a genius he said, his quote was, I'm not a chess genius. I'm a genius who happens to be good at chess. I'm a genius who's, okay, I can't remember the quote, but he applied his genius to chess. And what he meant by that was he would have been a genius anyway at anything he decided to do at any time. So the people I'm going to discuss today have a form of genius, or at least something that I wish that I had. And when I read these fairy tales to myself at night, they inspire me, they motivate me, they make me want to sort of apply myself in the way that they did. Now, just because I may work with credit cards or things like that, airline miles, all those sorts of things, by no means am I a genius, but that's what I just happen to be doing at this time. And these people, they probably would have loved that. or they would have been, real good at, video blackjack, or I don't know what they would have been like. But these are people from the past, and I like to learn their stories, so I like to read these stories at night. So I'm going to read you some stories, and hopefully it'll inspire you and motivate you on your journey of interesting financial hooliganisms. I don't know what the proper term is. Of course, nothing that any of us do is ever, bad or against the law or anything, but we like to view finances in an interesting way. And when people, I went to my college reunion, and they asked me, "What do you do?" And I said, I was explaining, "Oh, I move money from A to B, and I take a little off the top, or I take credit cards and then I resell gift cards." And finally, I just, slot machines. I finally just said, "You know what? I'm a financial gamer. I have fun with finances." And these people today, these were the OGs who had fun with finances. Now, hopefully you haven't heard of all these people. They're kind of unique people. They're not like super cool people. Well, they're not, I don't think they've made movies about any of these. Well, they've made a few. They've made a few movies, but they weren't big hits or anything like that. These people are unusual in that I think a lot of them are eccentric and creative and just fun people. So let me tell you some of their stories now. And thank you again for joining me. If you have questions or you want to share anything you may know about these people, let me know in the chat. So we're going to have a little story time right now. And I have some interactive pictures. Well, they're not interactive for you. They are for me because I'm going to put them on the screen and then take them off. But let's see if this can get you excited about the world of financial gaming the way these people did. Okay. Sorry, we are live. Oh, and speaking of which, there are like thunderstorms and stuff out there. So if we lose Wi-Fi or something, well, then I'll try to join back with my phone's hotspot or something or nothing. Anyway, let's begin. Our first person on our fabulous journey is someone by the name William Jennens, Jennens. Now, I did make a YouTube video about this guy a long time ago. I don't know if you read it or you saw it, but I'm going to quickly mention what that story is. William Jennens, and I'm doing this in order of chronological orders. He was known as William the Miser, or sometimes the Miser of Acton. He was a reclusive financier who lived at Acton Place in England. He was described as the richest commoner in England. Isn't that a wonderful title? I wish someone would call me that. He died unmarried and intestate, with a fortune estimated at £2 million at that time, which became the basis of the novel Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I don't know if you've ever read Bleak House. It's an excellent book. It's the kind of book I read at the beach. Most people are reading, Danielle Steele or Tom Clancy, but the duck reads Bleak House, because I like something fun. So, Bleak House by Charles Dickens. If you've never read the story, it's an interesting story. It's based on William Jennens, and instead of the hero of the book or the main family, it's called Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, whereas there was Jennens versus Jennens. Now, for William Jennens, his massive fortune, because like me, he was unmarried and had no interest in children. Who was going to get his massive fortune was the question. So all these people came out of the woodwork and tried to get it. And over years and years and years, what ended up happening was legal fees ate up the whole estate. So no one got it. Um, I myself intend to give all my money to dogs. Um, but William Jennings, no one knew what to do with it. And so this book, Bleak House, is actually sort of about that. The characters in there are called Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, and the families rip themselves apart trying to get at this money. But will they be able to get it before it's all been completely eaten up by the lawyers' fees? Charles Dickens never cared for lawyers, and Charles Dickens often writes about money. So it's an interesting tale. I recommend you read this, especially if you're like, on spring break or something, a little sunscreen, some White Claw, and Bleak House. That's, a great way to spend the weekend at Cancun, if you ask me. Okay, the next person on our journey, and I have an interactive photo. I do. Let me get this one for you. You're gonna love this one. You're gonna love this one. Okay. Here we go. Okay, can you see that? Look at that. Isn't that magnificent? Elizabeth of Russia. Look at that. Elizabeth of Russia, an empress, a fascinating figure. One great movie I recommend you see is Young Catherine, starring Julia Ormond, and Elizabeth is played by Vanessa Redgrave, and she's a fascinating financial person, I think. She is she was one of the most popular of the monarchs in Russia. She never executed a single person, although she would hang them in chains for life, so I don't know what's worse. But she was quite interesting. They say her court became one of the most splendid in all of Europe. She kind of spared no expense. Like I said, these are people who had fun with money. Now, of course, she actually never married. Also like the duck, and also like our friend William Jennings. So eventually, she had to give the crown, the succession, to her nephew. And it did say this, though. Even though she never married, she did find a long-term companion in Alexei Razmovsky, a kind-hearted Ukrainian peasant serf with a good bass voice. Razmovsky had been brought from his village to St. Petersburg by a nobleman to sing for a church choir, but the Grand Duchess purchased the talented serf for her own choir. A simple-minded man, Razmovsky never showed interest in affairs of state during all the years of his relationship with Elizabeth, which spanned from the days of her obscurity to the height of her power. As the couple was devoted to each other, there is reason to believe they may have married in a secret ceremony. Now, I always like that. People always ask me, Duck, why are you just a receptionist at a local school? Well, you know what? Sometimes there is something to be said about those who are just sort of devoted to something without always having to seek power and be overly ambitious. Maybe I'll get rewarded and, get married to the queen, something like that. You never know. But she was quite a beautiful woman, Elizabeth. A little chubby, but back then they liked that, so it worked for her. Let's see. I like this part. It talks a little bit about her reign as the empress. With all her shortcomings, Documents often waited months for her signature. I know that feeling. Elizabeth had inherited her father's genius for government. Her usually keen judgment and diplomatic tact again and again recalled Peter the Great, when what sometimes appeared as irresolution and procrastination was often a wise suspension of judgment under exceptionally difficult circumstances. From the Russian point of view, her greatness as a stateswoman consisted of her steady appreciation of national interests and her determination to promote them against all obstacles. I love that. That she took her time, like I do. Like I do. I'm a very slow worker. I have a million irons in the fire, and I try to do my best with all of them. I want to tell you a little bit about her court. Now, here's the kind of thing you might want to close your eyes and just imagine, just feel all of this. Elizabeth's court was one of the most splendid in all Europe. As historian Chertopov stated, the court was arrayed in cloth of gold, her nobles satisfied with only the most luxurious garments, the most expensive foods, the rarest drinks, the largest number of servants, and they applied this standard of lavishness to their dress as well. A great number of silver and gold objects were produced, the most the country had thus seen in its history. It was common to order over 1,000 bottles of French champagne and wines to be served at one event, and to serve pineapples at all receptions, despite the difficulty in procuring the fruit in such quantities. French plays quickly became the most popular and were often performed twice a week. In tandem, music became very important. So she was sort of creating this Renaissance time. Elizabeth spared no expense in importing leading musical talents from Germany, France, and Italy. She reportedly owned 15,000 dresses, several thousand pairs of shoes, and a seemingly unlimited number of stockings. How wonderful is that? Attractive in her youth and vain as an adult, again, similar to the duck, Elizabeth passed various decrees intended to make herself stand out. She issued an edict against anyone wearing the same hairstyle, dress, or accessory as the Empress. One woman accidentally wore the same item as the Empress and was lashed across the face for it. Another law required French fabric salesmen to sell to the Empress first, and those who disregarded the law were arrested, as well they should be. One famous story exemplifying her vanity is that once Elizabeth got a bit of powder in her hair and was unable to remove it without cutting a patch of her hair. She made all the court ladies cut patches out of their hair too, which they did with tears in their eyes. This aggressive vanity became a tenet of the court throughout her reign, particularly as she grew older. According to one historian, later in her life, her outbursts of anger were directed either against people who she thought endangered Russia's security or against women whose beauty rivaled her own. I like that she has priorities, you know what I'm saying? Despite her volatile and often violent reactions to others regarding her appearance, I love this woman. Elizabeth was ebullient in most other matters, particularly when it came to court entertainment. It was reported she threw 2 balls a week. One would be a large event with an average of 800 guests in attendance, most of whom were the nation's leading merchants, members of the lower nobility, and guards. The other ball was a much smaller affair, reserved for her closest friends and members of the highest echelon of nobility. The smaller gatherings began as masked balls, but evolved into metamorphoses balls by 1744. Most courtiers thoroughly disliked the balls, as most guests by decree looked ridiculous. Often she would change the gender of people during the events. But Elizabeth adored them. As Catherine the Great's advisor Potemkin posited, this was because she was the only woman who looked truly fine and completely a man, as she was tall and possessed a powerful body. He noted that she had beautiful legs and loved to wear male attire because of tight trousers. Again, very similar to the duck. Anyway, I find that she really enjoyed life and she spent money in interesting ways. that often did promote Russia and brought a sense of music and art and interesting things into the community. And she never killed anyone either, so I thought that was pretty interesting. So that is one of my favorite people, Elizabeth of Russia. Now let's move on a little bit more. We're going to go to one of my favorite people in the whole world, Jemmy Wood. Now, Jemmy Wood, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was an extremely eccentric man, and his name was James, but he didn't call himself Jimmy. He called himself Jemmy. And there's this fantastic book I recommend you read. I got a screenshot of the book called "The Life and Anecdotes of Jemmy Wood, the Eccentric Banker, Merchant, and Draper of Gloucester." Also an account of the remarkable trial with reference to his will. Now, this man, it is said, is the inspiration for another Charles Dickens novel, A Christmas Carol. And this is the original Ebenezer Scrooge, who is often portrayed in Disney versions as some kind of villain, but I think he's really misunderstood. Yes, he may have been slightly miserly, but he actually, the actual character of Jemmy Wood gave back to the community, donated, did all kinds of things. But he was a miser, and he was extremely frugal in interesting ways. He one day he wanted to go across the road and didn't want to pay for a taxi, so he pretended he was dead and rode in a hearse. How could I not love someone who does that? Sorry, this beer goes right to me. So I always thought Jemmy Wood was a fascinating character. He had his own bank, which was downstairs, and he had a little house upstairs and a bank downstairs. That really got me thinking, wow, apparently it was the oldest bank ever in England, and eventually they turned it into a McDonald's, so it no longer exists. Yes, that's true. But he also had a very similar will, where he was unmarried and enjoyed all his money by himself his whole life, similar to the Empress Elizabeth and William Jennings, and again the Duck. And but he was quite the character, so I recommend you read up a little bit about our friend Jemmy Wood. Now our next friend, Hetty Green. Oh man, I love this woman. Hetty Green was long before the movie The Wolf of Wall Street came out. Hetty Green was known as the Witch of Wall Street. Fascinating character. She was definitely a miser. And she wore the same outfit. Apparently you could smell her, coming down the street. Just draped, sort of witch-like, in this garb you see here. Usually unwashed. She lived in various mini hotel rooms, and never long enough to establish residency anywhere, so she wouldn't have to pay taxes. A woman after my own heart. She was quite interesting. At one point, she was the absolute richest woman in America, and that was in the early 1900s, 1916. When she was very little, she would sit with her father, who was an investor, and she would just pore through all the newspapers with him, and she just knew that she had to learn investing, and then she eventually inherited her father's genius for investing money. And her work, if you would call it that, was that she would walk down Wall Street, yes, Wall Street in New York, and go to her bank. And at the bank, they would lay out the red carpet for her. She would come in with these huge dressers full of her papers, right? She didn't have a laptop with a spreadsheet like the Duck does. So she had to keep them in these giant containers. She'd throw them on the floor, and she would sort of go through all her papers and be investing. And of course, the bank, supported her. And it reminds me a lot about me, of course, because when I go to the Excalibur, which I'll be there on Thursday, by the way, if anyone else is in Vegas. I'll be there Thursday and Friday and Saturday. But when I go to the Excalibur, they put me up in a room for free. They make sure all my drinks are taken care of, and they just sit me down at a slot machine, and their hope is to get my money by treating me so well. Well, they would do the same for the Witch of Wall Street. They would set her up in her bank, and they even had a special radiator for her, like those things on the side of the wall. She didn't pay for food, so she would put a bowl of porridge on top of a radiator, and that would heat it up, and that would be her food for the day. Yeah, she was quite a character. There was one time where she went all the way across town, or like the whole country, to pick up a debt from someone. And one day she went crazy. Okay, I don't know, this may be like an exaggeration of what I remember, but I think she did go crazy looking for 1 penny, or like a 5-cent piece or something, running around for weeks at a time. And eventually I think she did, yeah. She was just quite the character. At some time she was known as the Queen of Wall Street. If you read on this article in Wikipedia, it says, Green set up an office at the Chemical Bank, but continued to live in boarding houses, flats, or hotels. By then, she was known as the Queen of Wall Street. Her investing philosophy, in her words, included, in business generally, don't close a bargain until you have reflected on it overnight. That is absolutely true. There are so many things, and people in the DuckDeals group know I say this too. I'll be like, well, it's interesting, but give me a night to think about it. Maybe we should get these Home Depot gift cards or something like that. So I think it's a very good lesson in investing. Really think these things over, and if you can, sleep on it. She also thought, it is the duty of every woman, I believe, to learn to take care of her own business affairs. And a girl should be brought up to be able to make her own living. Whether rich or poor, a young woman should know how a bank account works, understand the composition of mortgages and bonds, and how the value of interest and how it accumulates. I love that. I think she was very much ahead of her time in that sense, and very much a pioneer in that. It says, Green's cheapness was legendary. She was said never to turn on the heat or use hot water. She wore one old black dress and undergarments that she changed only after they had been worn out. Again, guilty as charged. Let's see what else it says. Oh, she did not wash her hands. Well, that one is a little. And she rode in an old carriage. She ate mostly pies that cost 15 cents. One tale claims that Green spent half a night searching her carriage for a lost stamp worth 2 cents. Oh, okay, that's the story. In my mind, it was a penny, but whatever. Another asserts that she instructed her laundress to wash only the dirtiest parts of her dresses to save money on soap. Yet, from Hetty's perspective, just because I dress plainly and do not spend a fortune on my gowns, they say I am cranky or insane. There is also considerable evidence that her frugality was passed down from her family and reflected her Quaker upbringing. There is one story where her son Ned broke his leg or something, and she didn't want to pay a doctor to fix it. And eventually he lost his leg, which is horrible. But she paid him back later by deciding to make him the richest man in America, and he got all the money. So, you know, I'd give my right leg to get that money too. Okay. So, an interesting lady, Hetty Green. Eventually, I can't remember what happened. I think it was Ned's daughter or something. One of them got a lot of the money and kept it in a. I remember it would have made her roll in her grave. Kept it in a checking account with no interest, and then just like gave all the money away to like charities or something like that. Um, so her all her frugality and everything, she never really enjoyed the money, I don't think, which is kind of sad. And the money never stayed hoarded for long after she passed away. I think she should have been more like Elizabeth of Russia, but she wasn't. Another interesting character we're going to talk about right now is Miss or Mrs. Ida Wood. I love Ida Wood. You may have heard of her. I think they recently put another article. Sometimes you'll see articles about her show up on like Yahoo or sort of CNN clickbaits or whatever. But Ida Wood was an absolutely fascinating character. She reminds me of me in that the only marriage she would probably be interested in would be one of convenience, where she could get a lot of money out of it. But she was interesting. So what happened to her was she ended up living in a hotel with her sister. And only a few years ago, I think it was in 2013, something like that. Eventually, they found her in her hotel room. And wonder what was going on with this very interesting woman who lived with her sister. When they found the room in about 2013, 2010 or something like that, it was crammed with yellowed newspapers, cracker boxes, balls of used string, stacks of old wrapping paper, and several large trunks. Apparently she she paid all bills in cash, and there was a bellhop that said that for many years it was his habit to knock on the door and ask the ladies if they wanted anything, and they always requested the same thing: evaporated milk, crackers, coffee, bacon, and eggs, which were cooked in a makeshift kitchenette in the bathroom, okay? And occasionally fish, which they ate raw. From time to time, they also requested Copenhagen snuff, Havana cigars, and jars of petroleum jelly. Now, I myself have sort of done things similar to that. I like to treat myself with little gift packages that are similar, that aren't really groceries, but are things that can be consumed. And I have turned makeshift coffee makers in a hotel into hot water steamers for ramen noodles. So you can sort of live off of very little in a hotel. Now, what happened was they eventually found out that she was very, 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 very rich, of course. Here's what sort of happened. One lawyer began looking into her finances. Now, this is when she was 90 years old and still sort of living in the hotel. A representative from the union revealed that the sisters owned about $175,000 worth of stock and had not cashed their dividends for dozens of years. And they had owned a newspaper, which she had sold for over $250,000. And apparently she had sold as all of her possessions: furniture, sculptures, houses, tapestries, everything. And at the height of the financial panic in 1907, she took out all of her money, over $1 million, and she put it in a bag. Okay. She declared that she was tired of everything and checked into the Herald Square Hotel and disappeared for the next decades, and sort of just kept all the money there. It was very interesting. And what it was found out later was that she was sort of a commoner, not unlike the richest commoner in England, William Jennings. And in 19, she was determined to be someone else. So she was reading the newspapers, and she often read about someone named Benjamin Wood, a 37-year-old businessman and politician. Knowing they would never cross paths in ordinary course of events, she composed a letter on crisp blue stationery. Mr. Wood, sir, here's the letter. Having heard of you often, I venture to address you from hearing a young lady, one of your former loves, speak of you. She says you are fond of new faces. I fancy that, as I am new in the city and in affairs d'oeuvre, that I might contract an agreeable intimacy with you, of as long duration as you saw fit to have it. I believe that I am not extremely bad-looking, nor disagreeable, perhaps not quite as handsome as the lady with you at present, but I know a little more, and there is an old saying, knowledge is power. If you would wish to an interview, address a letter to number Broadway, P.O., New York, stating what time we may meet. Well, what happens was, believe it or not, Benjamin Wood, who was already with several women, did write back to this rather bold woman who said that she wasn't disagreeable looking, and that she was kind of smart and might be of use to him. Well, she became his mistress and then eventually married him after his previous wife died. So that's sort of how she came into her great wealth, and which I have absolutely no qualms with. And one of these days, if someone's interested in, or one of these days I might write a similar letter to someone very, very rich as well. Enya, maybe. Eventually, reporters called her the Belle of New Orleans and admired the bright plumage and fragile beauty that made her remarkable even in the parasol age. She was quite the character in New Orleans. And you know I'm always in New Orleans too. Let's see. There was a significant divide between them, between her and her husband. Ida excelled at saving money, but Ben was a careless spender and avid gambler. Those people who gamble, that's ridiculous. Oh, do you like my shirt I got from the Hard Rock Casino in Tampa? Me too. Okay. He played cards for very high stakes, once even wagering the entire Daily News newspaper. Luckily, he won that hand. He often wrote letters to Ida apologizing for his gambling habits, signing them, "Unfortunately for you, your husband, Ben." The next day he would be back at John Morrissey's gambling hall on Lower Broadway, where he won and lost large sums at roulette. Once he woke Ida up, spread $100,000 across their bed, and giddily insisted she count it. However, Ida, who's a very clever girl, devised methods for dealing with Ben's addiction, often waiting outside the club so that if he won, she was on hand to demand her share. If he lost, she charged him for making her wait. How cool is that? She promised not to interfere with his gambling as long as he gave her half of everything he won and absorbed all losses himself. When he died in 1900, the New York Times wrote, "It was said yesterday that Mr. Wood possessed no real estate and that his personal property was of small value." A true statement, in a sense, since everything he'd owned was now in Ida's name. So while Mr. Wood went out and had his fun and certainly lived life, Ida was saving, and she became quite rich. And at the very end, They found all her money sort of hidden away in the hotel, and she just saved all that money till the very end. Um, let's see. In that regard, right here it says in Wikipedia, in that regard, as in everything else, Ida was stubborn. Reporters, as yet unaware of the brothers, Homer and Langley Collier, living in similar squalor in Harlem, descended upon her hotel room, and they tried to save her, and she said, on several occasions when nurses weren't looking, she shuffled to a partly open window and tried to scream above the traffic of Herald Square, "Help, help, I'm a prisoner, get me out of here." She didn't want to be there with the nurses and the reporters and everyone who found out about that. She wanted to just be alone and enjoy sitting around her money and her jewels and all her thoughts of the past. Quite an interesting character. I love Ida Wood, but if you saw that story that I mentioned, it mentions the Collier brothers, and I'm going to talk about the Collier brothers right now. Now these guys, wow, what characters! Okay. So we've now moved into the early 1900s. So these guys were from the late 1800s through 1947. Characters of New York City. There were two of them, obviously. Homer and Langley. They lived in Harlem, and it says here, they became infamous for their bizarre natures and compulsive hoarding. They lived in seclusion in their Harlem brownstone on Fifth Avenue, where they obsessively collected books, furniture, musical instruments, and myriad other items, with booby traps set up in corridors and doorways to crush intruders. Both died in their home in the same month, March 1947, and were found dead, surrounded by more than 140 tons of collected items that they had amassed over several decades. Since then, that house has been turned into one of those little pocket parks, and it's Collier Park, and it's named for the brothers. They sort of always lived together. Langley was an accomplished pianist and even performed at Carnegie Hall, whereas Homer had a degree in law, but also studied engineering and chemistry. So these were not just, silly people. These were very intelligent men. But they did have the compulsive habit of the hoarding, which was not good for their health. After their mother's death, they continued to live in the Harlem brownstone that they inherited. At first, they were sort of social, but eventually their house started falling into disrepair. They purchased too many things. They just had too much stuff in the house. It says here that they would pick food out of garbage cans. By the early 1930s, the Collier brothers' brownstone had fallen into disrepair. Their telephone was disconnected in 1937 and was never reconnected, as the brothers said they had no one to talk to. Okay, that's so sad. Oh, those poor guys. Okay. Because the brothers failed to pay their bills, the electricity, water, and gas were turned off in 1938. They took to warming the house using a small kerosene heater. For a time, Langley attempted to generate electricity by means of a car engine. None of this is wise, by the way. At this point, they were doing weird things. Langley would fetch their water from a pump in a nearby park. Their only link to the outside world was via a crystal radio that Langley had made himself. Um, neighbors said that they were um, Neighbors and shopkeepers in the area described Langley Collier as a generally polite and rational man, but added that he was crazy. And a reporter who interviewed Langley described him as a soft-spoken old gentleman with a liking for privacy. Uh, yeah. Um, Langley was fiercely protective of Homer and would not allow anyone, because Homer became blind, and would not allow anyone to see or speak to him. When he caught neighbors attempting to peek into their windows, Langley bought the property for $7,500 cash at the neighboring home. Anything to help his brother. When a small fire broke out in the home in 1941, Langley refused to let firemen who extinguished the fire see or speak to his brother. While rumors and legends abounded in Harlem about the brothers, they came to wider attention in 1938 when there was a story about their refusal to sell their home for $125,000. $125,000 was a lot back then, especially in all of that, Great Depression times. The Times repeated information about the brothers hoarding, and also repeated neighborhood rumors that the brothers lived in some sort of Orientalist splendor and were sitting on vast piles of cash, afraid to deposit it in the bank. Neither rumor was true, however. The brothers were not insolvent. Eventually, the bank began eviction procedures and sent a crew to clean up the home. But Langley began yelling at the workers, prompting the neighbors to summon the police. Eventually, when that happened, Langley just wrote them a check and paid off the mortgage in a single payment, and then ordered everyone off the premises and withdrew outside scrutiny once more. He would only go out at night to get food. Not unlike that little possum I just saw, which, by the way, I don't know how much... I got so many views on that possum on my YouTube channel, so I can't wait to look that up. But yeah. Anyway, they were unusual. I don't know why. I don't know why these guys are in my book of favorite characters. I think what I like about them was that they loved each other and they cared for each other. They were brothers, and up until the end, they protected each other. And I don't know, it just sort of reminds me that money isn't everything, and then sometimes family comes first, or something like that. So those are the Collier brothers. We have two more stories, two more characters to go through tonight. And I want to talk to you about one of my favorite people in the whole world, Mary Ellen Pleasant. There's always new stories about Mary Ellen Pleasant. You've probably heard of her at some point. Here's a very good article. It was in the Los Angeles Times, titled "Black Woman Turned Savvy and Secrets into a Fortune." So that is this individual we're going to discuss today, Mary Ellen Pleasant. For more than a century, Mary Ellen Pleasant's reputation was as a voodoo queen, sorceress, madam, and murderer. But thanks to a historian's new book, the legendary San Franciscan is reclaiming her identity as a savvy businesswoman, gutsy heroine, and early champion of civil rights. Contradictions and legends abound. She is believed to have been born a slave in the South. She made a fortune and shared it, helping to free slaves and challenging racial bias in a case that reached the state Supreme Court. Every single detail about her past is contested, but one thing is for certain. The secrets she knew about real estate, stock, miscegenation, and adultery, translated into social as well as economic power. San Francisco was glittery with gold dust and seriously short of women in 1952 when Pleasant, 38, arrived on a steamer. Pleasant auctioned off her culinary skills to two rich San Francisco merchants for a whopping $500 a month. Over the decades, Pleasant eavesdropped on her rich employer's investment plans and parlayed her salary into a chain of laundries, speculated in gold and silver, bought real estate, ran luxurious boarding houses, and played matchmaker or madam, setting up women with prosperous men. Now, people also ask me, Duck, why are you a receptionist at a school? Well, that doesn't mean I'm not listening in to, amazing things in the world that are financial, and that I'm not quietly also amassing some money on my own, but I don't have to be out there in the middle of everything and letting everyone know how much money I have. That would be foolish. And so I really like that about Mary Ellen Pleasant. She eavesdropped, she was quiet, she stayed under the radar. She was kind of like me, just no one that anyone would look at twice. But she read everything she could, she listened to everything she could, and she gained as much knowledge as she possibly could. And that, to me, is extremely inspirational. Her good deeds were overshadowed by her secretive personality and murky past. Lurid newspaper articles and a fictionalized 1953 biography didn't help her reputation. It says, Pleasant does not conform neatly to the common stereotypes. Perhaps that is why novelists, more so than historians, have found her twisted legacy so enticing. By most accounts, she was born a slave in Georgia in 1814 and was separated from her parents when she was young. She spent part of her childhood with a Quaker woman on Nantucket Island, where she learned to read and write and worked as a clerk. And here, this is a very important quote. I have let books alone and studied men and women a good deal, she said in her biography. So she wasn't just, reading everything. She wanted to study people. And she sat there and listened to everything and absorbed. And no one thought of keeping a secret from the cook in the house, when they were discussing what to invest in or what real estate should be purchased. And quietly, she went and she made those same investments herself. Let's see. By the late 1860s, Pleasant may have been the richest black woman in America. She managed her businesses in the guise of a housekeeper and reputedly ran a string of bordellos, which were legal then. But the financial secrets of the elite were her real stock in trade. It says that the press called her Mammy, and her words is, listen, I don't like being called Mammy by everybody. I got a letter from a minister in Sacramento. It was addressed to Mammy Pleasant, and I wrote him back on his own paper that my name is Mrs. Mary E. Pleasant, and I wouldn't waste any of my paper on him. I love it. But in the 1870s, she became a silent business partner of minor financier Thomas Bell, a bachelor she had met on her voyage to California. They invested in gold and silver, and Bell moved into her newly built 30-room mansion on Octavia Street. Tongues began to wag, with the press nicknaming it the Mystery House, not unlike the Quack House where I live right now. Speculation about their relationship continued until Pleasant introduced Bell to a friend, Teresa Klingen, whom he married. So that couple married, and Mary Ellen Pleasant pretended she was their maid, and it says here she posed to outsiders as the trusted maid of the house, even though she owned the house. But then things went really, really crazy. In 1892, Pleasant's silent partner, Belle, fell down the stairs of her mansion to his death. Now, the gossip said that it was she who had murdered him. But because of property rights and everything, all of the mansion went to the wife, Teresa Klingen, who she had introduced. And eventually, Pleasant lost her mansion and was evicted. It says, she never forgot her treatment at the hands of the press. Here's a quote from her. You tell those newspaper people that they may be smart, but I'm smarter. They deal with words. Some folks say that words were meant to reveal thought. That ain't so. Words were meant to conceal thought. Interesting. Mary Ellen Pleasant died in 1904, living in a rundown apartment. Court records revealed she had $10,000 in real estate and jewelry, but lawyers and creditors got most of it. Again, bringing us full circle to Bleak House. If you don't enjoy that money, eventually the lawyers are going to just try to take it all away from you. I think that's a good... That's a good place. I have more people, but it has been 1 hour. So instead of me saying that there were 2 more people, that was just 1 more. I just love Mary Ellen Pleasant. Let's see. I hope that you have found some inspiration from these intriguing characters the same way that I have. None of them were perfect by any means. They all had sort of their demons and their obstacles in life. But money was something that they flirted with in interesting ways and in sometimes very brilliant ways, and in sometimes comical ways, and in sometimes reckless ways. But all of them had lives that really were entwined with money and financial decisions. And like I said, to me, these are like fairy tales in some ways. Some of them are cautionary tales of things that I don't want to happen. I know I don't want all of my money to go to lawyers. Oh, do you see that lightning outside? Oh yeah, it's getting scary out there. Oh yes, it looks like we're going to have to end this stream soon before the power goes out. But yeah, they were interesting characters, and some of them are cautionary tales. But all of them I want to learn from in some way, and hopefully I will make good decisions in my life and be able to enjoy money and to give back. I think that's important. And certainly not give it to a bunch of lawyers or anything like that. So I don't know. I hope you have found this entertaining or at least whimsical, and maybe it has given you something to think about. I think everyone should have their, not necessarily heroes or even anti-heroes, but people who they look towards in history that they want to learn from. And so thank you for watching another DuckDeals seminar. We'll have more coming weeks. Every 2 weeks I do another one. I think we should talk flus. I think it's about time we do. I think we should talk about, let's see. Yes, I think we need to talk more about Hyatt. Now, I've talked about Hyatt before, but I need to talk about some of the benefits that Hyatt and some new changes that they've made. We need to talk a little bit about Bitcoin, a little bit about cryptocurrency, especially how it can work with credit cards. Kind of interesting. I'm now a gold member on Frontier, so I'd like to discuss benefits of these lower level, lower tier airlines like Spirit and Frontier that can be quite unique. We can talk more about Vegas. I'll be in Vegas this weekend. If you're there, hit me up. It's going to be great. I'll be doing some more streaming, probably from the Cosmopolitan. It's just going to be a lot of fun. There's just great things to come. So thank you for joining me. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Keep making that money, making those airline miles, and one day I'll be reading about you in my book after the section about me, of course. Anyway, y'all have a good night, and we will talk to you soon.